They say when you fall in love at 18, it's just puppy love. They say it fades, that you'll forget by college, or by the time your career starts, or maybe when your heart breaks once and doesn't put itself back together the same way. But I remember every second of it. I was 18 when I met Oliver. He was a little older, a little more confident, and a lot more careless with his kindness, the kind that made girls fall for him without him even realizing. Or maybe he did. Maybe he just didn't care. He didn't see me at first. Not really. But I saw him. The way his eyes crinkled when he laughed. The way he held the door even when no one was behind him. The way he made everyone in the room feel like they mattered except somehow me. Maybe that's why I fell. Because I wasn't special. And I wanted to be. It started small. He helped me carry books in our freshman year. Asked me if I wanted to grab coffee before class. Said he liked how I always had extra pens. And to me, those little moments were everything. For him, they were probably just polite. But I mistook his politeness for possibility. I fed on every crumb like it was a meal. I turned glances into gestures, jokes into promises. And for 4 long years from 18 to 22 I stayed. Not because he ever asked me to, but because I kept hoping he would. He dated other girls. Of course he did. The kind of girls who were loud and shiny, who wore red lipstick and called him babe in public, who got into his car like they belonged there. And every time I told myself, he'll see me eventually. He'll notice that I'm still here, still waiting, still believing that we're meant to be. But he didn't. He dated. He laughed. He lived. And I watched. Like a supporting actress in a movie where I was supposed to be the lead. One night changed everything. We had gone out with a group of friends, dinner, drinks, laughter echoing through a restaurant that felt too small for the size of my heartache. I sat next to him closer than usual. He smelled like cedarwood and rain. I remember because I leaned in when he joked about something, pretending I couldn't hear. And he looked at me. Really looked at me. For the first time in years, it felt like he actually saw me. "Selena," he said, voice low. "You've always been around, huh?" I smiled. "I guess so. You're kinda like background music. Comforting." I laughed awkwardly. "Is that a compliment?" He shrugged. "It's just nice. Knowing you're always there. Feels like I could come to you when things get rough." I stared at him, heart thudding. "Do you ever think we could be more?" The words slipped out before I could catch them. And he didn't flinch. He just grinned like I'd told a joke. "You? Nah. You're not the type I date." The table around us buzzed with noise, forks clinking, someone laughing too loud at something dumb. But my world fell silent. "Not the type he dated." I swallowed. "Why?" "You're too safe. Like I don't have to chase you. You'll always be there." My chest cracked. "But maybe," he added, tapping his glass, "one day when I'm tired of the wild ones, you'll still be around. You'd make a good backup." Backup. That was the night I stopped loving him. Not suddenly. Not cleanly. But something inside me curled inward, like a flower closing at dusk. The next morning I took off the necklace he gave me once. Some cheap charm from a vending machine he thought was funny. I had worn it like a trophy. Now it felt like a chain. I stopped texting first. Stopped showing up at every event he might be at. Stopped smiling just because he was near. I became a ghost with a heartbeat. And he didn't even notice. Months passed. We graduated. Life began to move on. And then one sunny afternoon as I scrolled through my inbox I saw it. An invitation. Digital. Impersonal. "You're invited to the wedding of Oliver Grant and Lily Summers." I stared at the screen. Heart steady. Fingers still. He was getting married. And not to me. To Lily, the loud girl with the wine laugh and a face made for photos. They'd been dating a year. A year. And I had spent 4 waiting for a door that never opened. Everyone thought I'd break. Friends called. Asked if I was okay. Tried to sound casual. "You got the invite, right? You going?" I said yes. Because what else was I supposed to say? "No, I can't come because I spent 4 years waiting for someone who saw me as background noise and now he's marrying someone louder." Of course not. I told them I was happy for him. That I had moved on. That I'd be there. And the thing is, I wasn't lying. Not really. Because by the time the wedding arrived, I wasn't the same girl anymore. The morning of Oliver's wedding felt like any other. Calm. Bright. A little too perfect, like life was mocking me with its balance. I stood in front of the mirror adjusting my earrings, watching a version of myself I hadn't known until recently. Hair pulled back in soft waves. Eyes steady. No trace of the girl who once waited for his text at 2 a.m. Daniel stood behind me, fixing his cufflinks. He looked good, dangerously calm in a navy suit that fit like it was made for this moment. He wasn't nervous. He didn't ask again if I was sure I wanted to go. Because he trusted me. Trusted that this wasn't about running back to something. This was about walking through a door I had once begged to be opened. And finally realizing I didn't want what was behind it anymore. "You look settled," he said, sliding his hand around my waist. "I feel it," I replied. He kissed my shoulder, and we left without saying more. Because Daniel knew what Oliver never did. That quiet love doesn't mean weak love. It just means it's built to last. The venue was breathtaking. Golden light streaming through high windows, roses spilling from every corner. A string quartet playing something elegant and overused. It looked like money. It looked like Lily. People turned when I entered. Of course they did. I had been Oliver's shadow for 4 years. Everyone knew the story, even if they never said it out loud. She used to be in love with him. I could almost hear them whisper. Wonder how she's doing. But I didn't come alone. Daniel was beside me, calm as a lake. He shook hands, nodded politely, and when someone tried to comment on how brave I was for coming, he simply smiled and said, "She wanted to celebrate someone she once knew. That's not brave, that's closure." And suddenly I didn't feel like a scandal. I felt like a woman who survived herself. Oliver didn't see me at first. He was busy, hands tight, smile wider than his eyes. Lily looked stunning, radiant, confident. They were in love, or at least they looked the part. And then our eyes met. It was brief, but sharp, like the slice of paper that doesn't bleed right away. He blinked, then smiled, small, uncertain. He didn't wave, didn't speak, but he looked. And in that look was everything he didn't know how to say. Dinner was a slow affair. Toasts, laughter, polite conversations with strangers. Daniel was flawless. He talked to Oliver's friends like they were old buddies, told stories, made everyone laugh. And I sat beside him, not quiet, not small, but content. Oliver passed by our table once. He nodded. We nodded back. No words. Just air where a history used to be. Later, when the dancing began, Daniel pulled me up. "Let's give them something to look at." I laughed. "I'm not that graceful." "You don't have to be. You just have to be real." And so we danced. Not a show. Not a performance. Just two people swaying in a room full of people who were still learning how to let go. Oliver watched us once. I saw it. 1 second too long. Lily touched his arm and said something. He smiled. But his eyes didn't follow her. Outside I needed air. I stepped onto the balcony, the cool wind curling around my skin like a question. And then he joined me. "Selena. Oliver. You came." I was invited. He laughed nervously. "Right." A pause. "You look different." "I am." Another pause. "I didn't expect you to bring someone." I turned to him. "I didn't expect to come at all." His eyes searched mine. "Is he good to you?" "He doesn't ask me to prove my worth." He flinched just barely. "You were always so loyal. I was always invisible." He looked down. "I wasn't trying to hurt you." "But you did." "I know." The silence that followed wasn't bitter. It was honest. He looked at me like he was finally seeing the girl who used to wait in the rain for him to notice her. And she wasn't there anymore. Only I was. And I wasn't waiting. "I'm happy for you, Oliver," I said quietly. "Really?" He nodded. "You sure?" "Yes." Because even if he wasn't right for me, I had found someone who was. Someone who didn't look at me like a backup plan. Someone who danced with me in full view of the past and didn't flinch. He stepped closer. "If we had met differently." I raised a hand. "We didn't." And that was the end of that. When I returned inside, Daniel was waiting. No questions. No doubt. Just an open hand and a quiet smile. "You okay?" he asked. I nodded. "I'm better than okay." We left before the cake. Before the last dance. before the past could follow us home. In the car, he reached for my hand, and I realized I hadn't cried, hadn't cracked, hadn't felt like less. I had shown up at the wedding of the man I used to love, and left more whole than I had ever been with him. The drive back from Oliver's wedding was strangely quiet. Not awkward, not tense, just still. Daniel had one hand on the wheel and the other resting between us, fingers stretched open, waiting for mine. I slipped my hand into his without a word. We didn't need to say much, because in that silence he gave me the thing Oliver never could: space to breathe. Not space to beg, explain, or defend. Just space. We pulled into the driveway just past midnight. Our porch light blinked on automatically, bathing the front door in a soft gold glow. Daniel unlocked the door, kicked off his shoes, and turned to look at me. "You hungry?" I shook my head. "No. Just tired." He didn't press. Didn't ask me to talk. Didn't hover. He just nodded and wrapped me in a hug. A hug that said, "I'm here." Not, "Tell me everything." And that was enough. I stared at the ceiling long after he fell asleep. The night played in my head like a movie I'd watched too many times. Only this time I wasn't the tragic lead. This time I was the narrator, watching a version of myself from the past navigate love with hope instead of wisdom. It didn't hurt. Not like before. But it lingered. Not because I wanted him, but because for so long I had believed I wasn't whole without him. And now I finally knew I was. The next morning I received a message. From an old friend, Laura. "Saw you at the wedding. You looked incredible. Didn't expect you to come, especially not with someone like him. Good for you." Then another, a little later, from someone I hadn't heard from in years. "Did you really move on? Or are you just pretending?" I deleted that one, because no one who knew my silence over the years would ever question my strength now. Daniel cooked breakfast. "Feeling better?" he asked. "Lighter," I said. We ate in quiet comfort, clinking forks, warm coffee, shared glances. Afterward, he touched my hand and asked, "Are you sure it's over?" I didn't hesitate. It was over long before last night. I just hadn't walked away yet. A week passed. The wedding became a memory, not a wound. People stopped calling. The whispers died down. And for a while it felt like life had truly moved on. Until I received another message. This one from Lily. Yes, that Lily. Oliver's new wife. It was short. "Hey, can we talk?" I blinked at the screen. Why? Why would Lily want to talk to me, the girl her husband used to ignore, the ghost in his story? I didn't reply. Not immediately. I sat with it, thought about it, considered the weight of her request. And then curiosity won. "Sure. When?" We met at a small cafe on a Tuesday afternoon. She wore oversized sunglasses and a white sweater too clean for the real world. When she pulled them off, I was surprised to see fear. Not anger. Not suspicion. Just uncertainty. "I know this is weird," she said, stirring her tea. "It is," I replied honestly. "But I'm not here to accuse you," she said quickly. "I'm not that woman." "Then what do you want?" She hesitated. I read something he wrote. A letter. I wasn't supposed to see it. I leaned back. "What kind of letter?" She swallowed. "A goodbye letter. To you." My chest tightened. "He wrote it the night before our wedding," she said softly. "He never sent it. But I found it." She pulled out her phone and opened a file. "I thought you should know what he said. Not because I think you owe him anything, but because I don't want to start my marriage with shadows." She slid the phone across the table. I hesitated. "Then read." "Selena, if you're reading this, I guess I sent it. But I probably didn't. I never had the courage to say things when they mattered. I don't know what this is, maybe guilt, maybe closure. Maybe just the part of me that never understood how to love you properly. You were always there. Always kind. Always waiting. And I was always somewhere else, chasing noise when all I needed was calm. I think I'm marrying someone wonderful. But I keep thinking about you. Not because I still love you, but because I never gave you the ending you deserved. You were never my backup. I was just too blind to see you were the one person who stayed when I didn't even ask. If this letter ever finds you, I'm sorry. Truly. Oliver." I placed the phone back down. Lily was watching me. Do you love him? I asked gently. Yes, she said. But I needed to hear you don't. I don't. And I meant it. She sighed with relief. I think. I needed to know he wasn't leaving part of himself behind. I reached across the table and touched her hand. I left a long time ago. Even if my body stayed. When I walked away from that cafe, I felt weightless. Not because he apologized. Not because Lily trusted me. But because I had proof. Not of his regret. But of my growth. He had written a letter. I had written a life. And mine didn't need postage. After the meeting with Lily, I walked home through the park. Not because it was the fastest route, but because it was the same one I used to take after every hangout with Oliver. Back then I'd walk slowly. Replay every word. Overanalyze every look. Try to stretch 5 minutes of attention into 5 hours of hope. Now, the path was just a path. The bench was just a bench. And the past felt like fog that had lifted quietly. I took a deep breath and realized I was no longer looking back. When I walked through the front door, Daniel was in the kitchen chopping vegetables. He looked up, saw me, and smiled. Hey, you're home early. I leaned against the counter. He noticed the shift in my expression. Everything okay? I met Lily, I said simply. He didn't stiffen. Didn't panic. Just said, okay, do you want to talk about it? And I did. So I did. He listened quietly as I told him about the message, the cafe, the letter. Everything. When I finished, he didn't ask if I was still hurt. He didn't ask if I still felt anything. He just said, I'm proud of you. And that was the difference. Oliver would have turned it into a moment about himself. Daniel made it a moment about me. That weekend, Daniel and I went on a small road trip, just 2 hours out of town. No destination. No pressure. We stopped at a roadside diner, ordered milkshakes, and laughed about nothing. At one point, as we walked through an old antique market, I picked up a vintage mirror. It was cracked in one corner but still beautiful. Reminds me of something, I murmured. Of what? He asked. Me. Back then. He looked at the mirror, then at me. You're not cracked anymore, he said softly. You're restored. And I smiled, because I finally believed that. Back home I started painting again. I hadn't touched a canvas in months. But that night something poured out of me, something honest. I painted a woman standing in the rain, arms spread wide. She wasn't dancing. She wasn't crying. She was just standing, letting it fall, letting it cleanse, letting it be. When I finished, I titled it, Unapologetically Dry. Because that's how I felt now. No longer drenched in the storm of someone else's silence. A few days later, Daniel asked if I wanted to meet his parents. We'd been together nearly a year and it just felt right. Not a big deal. No pressure. Just next. His mom hugged me like she already knew me. His dad made me laugh with a joke about crossword puzzles and lost remotes. At dinner, his mom leaned over and said, I don't know who came before you and I don't need to. But I can tell, you healed something in him. I blinked. He healed something in me too. Oliver had never met my parents. He always had an excuse. Too busy. Too tired. Not ready. Daniel had met them twice. And both times he asked about their health, their stories, their history. Because he wasn't just interested in me. He was interested in where I came from. One night, while brushing my hair before bed, I looked at myself in the mirror and whispered a thank you to the girl I used to be. For holding on. For breaking. For letting go. Because she had survived the ache of being almost loved. And now she was fully loved. I thought about the letter Oliver wrote. Not often, just once or twice. And every time I did, it became less about him. And more about me. Because regret is loud but healing is quiet. Regret writes late-night confessions. Healing writes new chapters. And I was deep into mine. One morning while walking downtown, I passed a bookstore. In the window was a journal with gold-foiled words across the front. To the girl who stayed and finally left. I bought it instantly. Not because I needed to write him a letter back. But because I had more to say. To me. And she deserved to hear every word. The new journal sat on my nightstand for days before I touched it. Every time I walked past it, I glanced down at the gold-foiled words. To the girl who stayed and finally left. They didn't hurt anymore. Instead, they felt like a quiet nod to the past. A closing note. A full stop instead of a comma. When I finally opened the journal, I didn't write about Oliver. Not even once. I wrote about the first time Daniel brought me tea without asking. I wrote about how my chest felt the night I heard him laugh in his sleep. I wrote about the way he looks at me when I speak, not with interest but with investment. I wrote about how I finally stopped checking my phone for texts that would never come. How peace started sounding louder than anxiety. How I stopped rewriting old memories and started creating new ones. And in those pages, I found a version of myself I had buried for years. Not the girl who begged to be seen, but the woman who refused to disappear. A few weeks later, I was invited to a small alumni dinner. Some college friends I hadn't seen in years. I said yes, mostly out of curiosity. Daniel offered to come, but I told him I'd be fine. He kissed my hand before I left. "You're stronger than you think," he said. And I believed him. The restaurant was dimly lit. Tables full of people I hadn't spoken to since cap and gown day. Most were married. Some divorced. A few still chasing dreams in half-packed apartments. And then of course Oliver was there. Alone. He looked different. Older maybe. Tired in a way that wasn't just physical. He saw me. Of course he did. Our eyes met for a fraction of a second too long. Then he looked away. And for the first time in forever, I felt nothing. Not anger. Not longing. Not even pride. Just nothing. An old friend named Rachel sat next to me. She leaned in with a grin. "You heard about the divorce, right?" My breath caught, but only slightly. "No." Lily left. Said he wasn't fully present. That he had one foot stuck in a memory. I blinked. Rachel shrugged. "I guess some people never really show up, even when they're physically there." I nodded slowly, because I knew exactly what she meant. I had spent 4 years trying to get Oliver to be fully present, and he never was. And now someone else had tried and failed too. It wasn't me. It was never me. It was him. After dinner, I stepped outside for air. And like clockwork, he followed. "Selena." I turned. "Hi." A long pause. "How've you been?" he asked. "Good. You look it." "Thanks." Another pause. Then, "I read something online. A painting that went viral. It was yours, right?" "Maybe. The one with the girl in the rain. Not crying. Just standing there." I tilted my head. "Yes. That was mine. It made me think of you." I raised an eyebrow. "But I don't think she was you," he said. "She wasn't." He exhaled. "I messed up. Didn't I?" "You didn't mess up," I replied calmly. "You just didn't choose me. That's what I mean." I nodded. "Well, now I choose me." He looked down. Then softly, "I miss what we never had." I smiled, not out of bitterness but truth. "I don't." Back home, Daniel was reading on the couch. He looked up as I entered. "All good. All clear," I said. He stood. Opened his arms. I stepped into them without hesitation. And I whispered into his shoulder. "I saw him." "I figured," he said. I said goodbye again. But this time without words. Did he hear it? "I think so." Daniel pulled back, looked into my eyes. "You ready to stop writing about endings?" "Yes." "Good. Let's start our beginning." And that night I wrote nothing. I just lived. Because some chapters aren't written. They're felt. Daniel and I moved into a new apartment that fall. It wasn't massive or luxurious, but it had everything we needed. Warm wood floors, sunlight that poured through every window, and a balcony where we could watch the seasons change without speaking a word. Felt like home. And not the kind you build for someone else to notice. The kind you build because you finally found peace inside yourself. Unpacking became a ritual. Each box held fragments of my past life. College books, old journals, photos that used to make my heart ache. I found a framed picture of Oliver and me from some campus event. He wasn't even looking at me in it. I studied it for a second, then slipped it into the donate box. Daniel walked in just then, saw what I was doing, and said nothing. He knew. He always did. We hosted a small housewarming the following week. Just a few close friends. Laura came, bringing wine and her usual dramatic flair. I swear, she said, plopping down on our couch. You look so disgustingly in love I could throw something. Daniel laughed. I smiled. I am. Is it weird? She asked. Knowing where you were just a year ago? I thought for a second. It's not weird, I said. It's miraculous. Because back then I didn't know what it felt like to be chosen every day. To be looked at like I was the only answer to a question someone had been asking their whole life. Now I did. The journal I had bought earlier was filling up fast. Page after page of reflections, memories, new beginnings. But none of it was about Oliver anymore. It was about learning how to wake up without dread, how to cook breakfast with music playing, how to sit beside someone and not wonder when they'd leave. It was about life. Real life. The one I never thought I'd get to live. One evening, Daniel sat me down at the kitchen table. There was no box, no ring, just 2 mugs of tea and that look in his eyes. I want to talk about the future, he said. Okay. I know you've been through a lot. I know what it cost you to stop waiting for someone who didn't see you. And I don't want to rush you. I leaned in. But if you ever want to build something permanent, something real, I'm here. Fully. I didn't cry. I just smiled. I want that too. And that was that. No fireworks. No Instagram announcement. Just 2 people who had done the work and were ready for something that didn't need to be earned through pain. Weeks passed. One morning I got a package in the mail. No return address. Inside, a necklace. Cheap. Vending machine plastic. The same one Oliver had given me years ago. There was no note. No explanation. I stared at it for a full minute, then placed it in a drawer, closed it and walked away. Because the past doesn't always ask permission to return. But it doesn't deserve a seat at your table just because it knocks. Daniel and I adopted a dog. A quiet one. Rescued from a shelter. He followed me everywhere. Shadowing my every step like he understood I once knew what it meant to be abandoned too. We named him Poet. Because every time I looked at him, I was reminded that stories can start over. And still end well. I submitted a short essay to a digital magazine. About closure. About healing. About how it feels to sit across from the person who once made you cry. And not feel anything at all. They published it with the title, I Loved Him Until I Didn't. And that's the bravest thing I ever did. It went viral. Not because it was scandalous, but because it was real. Because every woman who's ever whispered, maybe he'll come back, saw themselves in it. And every woman who finally whispered, I don't want him to, felt seen. Later that night, Daniel found me scrolling through the comments, teary-eyed. You okay? I think so, I said. Want to talk about it? No. I just didn't know how many of us were out there. Loving ghosts. Waiting for doors that would never open. He kissed my forehead. You opened your own. And I had. A few months after my article went viral, I was invited to speak at a panel. The topic, letting go of almost love. The irony wasn't lost on me. For years I had been the girl in the back row, clapping quietly, wondering if anyone on stage had ever loved someone who forgot to love them back. Now I was being asked to sit on that stage, to speak, to lead. I told the story the same way I always did now, without bitterness, without dramatics, just truth. How I fell for someone who was never mine, how I waited, how I disappeared, how I rebuilt, and how choosing myself didn't come with fanfare or music. It came with silence, but a silence that sounded like peace. After the event, a young woman approached me, eyes rimmed red. She whispered, "Thank you." I didn't ask why, because I already knew. She was still waiting for someone who only thought of her when the rest of the world got quiet. And tonight, for the first time, maybe she'd stop. Daniel picked me up from the event. How'd it go? He asked, handing me a bottle of water. I think I finally closed the book. He smiled, reached for my hand. You've been writing a new one this whole time. That night we talked about marriage again, but not like people planning an event, like people planning a life. What if it's just a backyard ceremony? I asked. Perfect, he said. No dress code. Just love. He nodded. And food. Good food. And music, I added. But not the kind that makes people cry. The kind that makes them dance. We laughed. And it felt good. Clean. Light. Because this time, I wasn't planning a fairy tale to cover up heartbreak. I was planning reality, and it was better. A few days later, I bumped into someone I hadn't seen in years. Cameron, one of Oliver's old friends. We ran into each other at a bookstore. He looked surprised, then smiled. I heard about your article. Yeah. It was brave. Thanks. A pause. He's not doing great, you know. Moved cities. Works late. Doesn't really see people. I shrugged. I hope he finds what he's looking for. Cameron tilted his head. I think he did. He just realized too late that he'd already passed it. I smiled gently. Then I hope he finds peace in knowing someone else did. And I walked away. Because not every update requires a response. And not every ghost deserves resurrection. At home, Daniel and I danced in the kitchen while dinner simmered. No music. Just the hum of the oven, the clinking of forks, our breath in sync. He looked down at me, eyes soft. Tell me again what you said to yourself when you finally let him go. I thought for a moment. Then whispered. I deserve more than someone who only remembers me when they're alone. He nodded. And I'll keep reminding you. We didn't plan an engagement. There was no ring.
No Facebook announcement.
Just one quiet morning over breakfast when he said, I want to wake up with you for the rest of my life. And I replied, then let's do that. We sent out invites to only 15 people. Handwritten. No gold foil. No RSVP website. Just love printed in ink. I didn't invite Oliver. Not because I was angry, but because that chapter had closed without him even noticing. And I wasn't reopening it for nostalgia. This was mine. Mine and Daniel's. Built from ashes. Held together by choice. Lit by the quiet fire of mutual respect. As I folded the last invitation, I thought about that girl at 18. How she would have waited by her phone, praying to be chosen. And now, she had chosen herself. And someone else had chosen her too. The backyard wedding happened on a Saturday in late spring. The sky was the softest kind of blue, the kind that doesn't brag about being perfect, it just is. Birds chirped. Wind moved through the trees like a whispered blessing. There were folding chairs on the grass. Handwritten vows tucked in jacket pockets. Mismatched glassware, laughter that rose without effort. And no one dressed to impress, just to belong. And somehow it was everything. Not because it was grand, but because it was real. I didn't wear a veil. Didn't carry a bouquet. Just a pale yellow dress and a smile I didn't have to fake. Daniel stood under the tree where we first planned this day. Nervous but sure. When I reached him, he whispered, You came. I never left, I whispered back. And that's how it started. No fanfare. Just us. Fully arrived. Fully seen. The vows weren't memorized. We stumbled through a few lines. Laughed when Daniel dropped the ring and it rolled across the grass. But when he took my hands and said, You are not my second choice. You are my right timing. I nearly forgot to breathe. And when I said, I used to wait for someone who saw through me. Now I love someone who sees me. His hands trembled just a little. And it was perfect. Because it was flawed. And honest. And ours. After the ceremony, Laura pulled me aside. I can't believe the girl who used to cry in my dorm room is you now. I laughed. I barely recognize her either. She'd be proud, she said. She better be, I replied. She walked through hell so I could get here. Later, after the cake and the photos and the hugs, I sat alone for a moment. Just a moment. And I thought of Oliver. Not in longing. In relief. Because he didn't ruin me. He revealed me. He peeled back the layers of who I thought I had to be. So I could finally meet the version of myself who never needed to beg for love. The girl who no longer mistook silence for mystery. Distance for depth. And excuses for effort. She was gone. And in her place, a woman had emerged. Fully rooted. Fully free. That night, Daniel and I sat on the porch barefoot and tired. He handed me a letter. Found this in one of the boxes, he said. Figured you'd want it now. It was the old journal. The one I had filled page after page after page, slowly bleeding out the girl I used to be. I flipped to the first page. To the girl who stayed and finally left. Daniel leaned over. What would you write now? I thought for a long second. Then whispered. Asterisk to the girl who stayed, thank you. To the woman who left, I'm proud of you. And to the love that came after, thank you for showing me I never had to earn it. Asterisk. He kissed my temple. And the night wrapped around us soft and whole. I didn't know if Oliver ever learned how to love someone right. I didn't care. Because the version of me that waited for that answer didn't live here anymore. She was already taken. By herself. By Daniel. By a life that asked nothing but honesty. And gave everything in return. The first year of marriage didn't feel like a fairy tale. It felt better. It felt like grocery lists and laundry days and the quiet way Daniel always left the bathroom light on when I came home late. Just in case I needed to find my way without stumbling. It felt like forehead kisses while passing in the hallway. Like Sunday mornings that smelled like pancakes and old vinyl records. No drama.
No guesswork.
Just two people choosing each other, even when the spark wasn't loud. Especially when it wasn't. I began teaching part-time at a local community center. Art classes for women rebuilding themselves. Some were recovering from divorce. Some from heartbreak. Some from never learning how to love themselves in the first place. And when they asked about my story, I told them only what mattered. I once loved someone who didn't love me back. And then I learned that didn't mean I was unlovable. That was enough. Because the truth didn't need to be tragic. It just needed to be shared. One afternoon after class, a woman lingered behind. I read your article, she said. I nodded. She looked nervous. I was her, she said, voice shaking. The one who thought love had to hurt to be real. I walked over and hugged her. No, I whispered. You were the one who survived. And she cried. And I didn't flinch. Because now I wasn't ashamed of where I'd been. I was equipped because of it. Daniel framed one of my paintings. The one titled Unapologetically Dry. He hung it above our bed. Why this one? I asked. Because that's who you are now, he said. A storm that doesn't need to rage to be powerful. And that's how he always saw me. As something strong. Not fragile. Something sacred. Not broken. Around our 1-year anniversary, I got another message. From Oliver. A short email. I saw your article again. I didn't know how far you'd come. I'm glad you did. I hope he deserves you. Take care, Selena. There was no attachment. No request. Just words. I stared at it for a moment, then archived it. Not out of malice, but because some things don't need replies. And some goodbyes only become real when they go unanswered. Daniel and I celebrated our anniversary quietly. Dinner at home. Candles. Our favorite old movie. He handed me a small box. Inside, a compass necklace. He said, for the girl who finally found her way. I hugged him tight, because I didn't need the stars anymore. I had my center. People still asked how I moved on. I never had a perfect answer, because healing wasn't a straight line. It was messy, nonlinear, filled with setbacks and silent victories. But if I had to answer now, I stopped trying to be remembered by someone who forgot me when I was right in front of them. And I started building a life that didn't need his memory to exist. That was the truth. That was the freedom. One morning I woke up early. The sky outside was painted in soft peach and lilac. I stood on our balcony holding a cup of tea, wrapped in the same cardigan I wore the night I realized I had stopped loving Oliver. And I whispered, you don't get to live here anymore. Because he didn't. And he never would again. 2 years later I passed by the old campus bookstore. The one where I first met Oliver. The one where I dropped a book on his foot and apologized 3 times in a row. It had changed. New signage. New window displays. New kids inside who had no idea how many ghosts once lived in those aisles. I didn't stop. Didn't linger. But I smiled. Because that place had held a version of me I no longer needed to visit. A girl who thought proximity meant promise, and being the one who stayed would someday be rewarded. She had grown up. And she was free now. That same week my publisher called. My essay had inspired more than just shares. They wanted a full collection. Stories from women like me. Ones who stayed. Ones who left. Ones who rebuilt. And they wanted me to lead it. I said yes. Not because I wanted validation. But because someone out there was 18 and waiting for a text that would never come. And she deserved better. She deserved to hear that survival is not just about leaving. It's about choosing not to return. Daniel built me a writing nook in the corner of our bedroom. Just a desk, a chair, a candle. But it felt like a cathedral. A place where I could honor everything I'd survived, and everything I was still becoming. He walked in one evening, handed me a cup of tea, and said, "You know what I admire most about you? What? You never gave up on love, even when it didn't look back." I looked at him, tears warm behind my eyes. I gave up on needing it from the wrong people. And that's when I knew I had finally healed. Because love wasn't something I chased anymore. It was something I held. A few months later, I was invited to give a TED-style talk. The theme? Rewriting the ending. I stood under bright lights, looking out at strangers waiting to hear something profound. And I simply said, "This isn't a story about heartbreak. It's a story about return. Not to him, but to myself." They clapped. And I felt nothing but stillness. No fear. No longing. Just clarity. After the event, a woman in her 40s approached me. She said, "You said what I never could." And I told her, "You just did." At home, Daniel and I celebrated with takeout and red wine. He played an old love song on his phone and pulled me into the living room. No speeches. I teased. "Just this," he said. And we danced. Not like lovers trying to impress, but like partners who already knew the steps. And more importantly, how to catch each other when they forgot them. One day I wrote a final letter to Oliver. I never sent it. I burned it in our fireplace and watched the ash rise. You didn't ruin me. You revealed me. And for that I'm free. Years from now, if someone asks me about the boy I loved when I was 18, I'll say, "She waited for him to see her. He never did. And thank God, because now she sees herself." And maybe that's the most beautiful ending of all. Years later, I walked past the building where I once waited for him to call. It was just concrete now. No echoes. No ghosts. Just a place I used to leave pieces of myself behind. One message, one glance, one unanswered hope at a time. But today I didn't stop. Because I wasn't looking for closure anymore. I had already found it in a cup of tea. In a soft morning kiss. In the sound of someone saying my name like it was enough. Sometimes I still think about that girl. The one who believed love meant waiting. The one who smiled when he looked her way, even if it was just for a second. But I don't grieve her anymore. I thank her. Because she held on long enough for me to take over. And I kept going. Right into a life that never asked me to beg for space. Right into a love that never made me guess. Right into the kind of peace that doesn't need a witness to be real. He lost me slowly. Like a song fading out. One quiet note at a time. But Daniel, he found me all at once. And every day since, he's made sure I never feel invisible again.